The greatest ship. When the White Star Line announced the completion of the supership, the Titanic, in 1912, they said that she was the greatest ship ever built. Luxurious, unsinkable, and unbelievably big. How big was she? The Titanic was more than 882 feet, 269 meters long. That's the length of 22 buses lined up end to end. She was the largest movable object in the world. When the Titanic passed a small ship, she was like a cloud going by, a big black cloud that blotted out the sun. The Titanic's hull, or lower body, was divided into 16 compartments. Up to 4 could flood, and she would still be able to float. The Titanic was like a floating palace. There were elegant restaurants, Turkish baths, and a swimming pool. Each class had separate rooms, lounges, and eating areas. First class lounge. Reading and writing room. Private promenade. Gymnasium. Third class dining room. Sauna and steam room. The section of the Titanic illustrated below is shown in this box. Grand staircase. First class staterooms. Wooden lifeboat. Funnel. First class suite rooms. Turkish baths. Swimming pool. Third class cabins. On her route, the Titanic would also dock in France and Ireland to pick up passengers. Captain Edward J. Smith. On her maiden or first voyage, she would sail across the Atlantic, from England to New York City. In charge of the Titanic was Captain Edward J. Smith. He would navigate from the bridge at the front of the ship. This was to be his last voyage before retiring. Newspapers called the ship the Millionaire's Special, but its passengers were really from all walks of life. John Jacob Astor and his wife had first-class tickets. They were among the wealthiest passengers and had a suite or group of rooms fit for a king. Not so rich people were going too. Many were immigrants, with all their possessions in their luggage, hoping to start a new life in America. Colonel John Jacob Astor and his wife, Madeline. 1912, April 10th, 12 p.m. All aboard! At last, the Titanic is ready to set sail from England, teeming with more than 1,000 passengers. Among them are dozens of children. Edmond and Michel Nevotil from France are traveling in second class with their father. They are only 2 and 3 years old. Crowds on the dock are waving flags and handkerchiefs. Some are cheering, while others are shouting, "Good luck, Titanic!" Passengers wave goodbye to friends and family. The Astor's dog, named Kitty, came with them and was kept in kennels and exercised every day. White Star Line. RMS Titanic. Introducing the largest and finest steamer in the world. Maiden voyage, sail from Southampton, England, to New York City, U.S. April 10th to April 17th, 1912. Revolutionary design, extraordinary dimensions. New 46,000 tons. 2,648 passengers, 899 crew. Accommodation, excellent value, price per person shown. First class. Lavish and spacious private staterooms include sitting room, 2 bedrooms, and 2 dressing rooms, equipped with telephones, heaters, electrical fans, and steward call bells. Multi-room parlor suites, $2,500. Also available, kennels for pets and single-berth cabins for servants, $150. Second class, well-furnished staterooms include sink with mirror and bed linen changed every day. 1-berth or 2-berth staterooms, $60. Third class, up to 6 people per cabin. Clean cabins with bunks include wardrobe space, sink with mirror, and lighting. Bed linen provided. 2-berth stateroom, $40. April 13th. Danger ahead! After 3 days at sea, the trip has seemed like a vacation for most of the passengers. But soon, the Titanic will be entering an area of the North Atlantic Ocean where icebergs float. April 14th, 11:40 p.m. All day, the Titanic had received iceberg warnings in Morse code over the wireless telegraph. Now, as the ship speeds through the night, lookouts watch for icebergs from the crow's nest. All is quiet on this freezing cold night, and the ocean is incredibly calm. But then, with their watch about to come to an end, the lookouts see a dark object looming ahead. It is an iceberg, and the Titanic is heading straight toward it. Quickly, one of the lookouts sounds the alarm bell and shouts into the telephone connected to the bridge, "Iceberg, right ahead!" With no time to waste, the first officer calls for the ship's wheel to be turned as far as possible. Then he orders the engines to be stopped and put into reverse. High in the crow's nest, the lookouts brace themselves for a collision as the iceberg looms closer and closer. Slowly, the ship starts to veer away from the iceberg, but too late. There is a slight bump and a ripping noise as the iceberg scrapes the starboard side of the Titanic. Many passengers are asleep. The small bump to the ship isn't enough to disturb them, but it wakes up Captain Smith. He rushes to the bridge to find out what happened. Down below, the men working in one of the boiler rooms are almost swept off their feet as water gushes into the room. Within minutes, the water is waist high. Automatic doors begin to seal the flooding compartments. The men rush to escape before they shut. But the water is rising higher and higher and flowing over the tops of the compartments, flooding one after another. April 15th, 12:05 a.m. "Uncover the boats!" Captain Smith orders his crew. Then he instructs the 2 wireless operators to start signaling for help. He knows the Titanic is going to sink, and he knows that there are not enough lifeboats to get all the passengers off safely. Not far from the panic in the boiler rooms, many passengers are still fast asleep, unaware of the collision. Out on the third-class deck, a few passengers find chunks of ice and start playing soccer. They have no idea how much danger they are in. April 15th, 12:30 a.m. It is now past midnight. Many passengers come up from their rooms in their pajamas, but some are still wearing their evening clothes. Colonel Astor and his wife make their way to the gymnasium next to the boat deck. While they wait for the crew to get a lifeboat ready, Colonel Astor cuts through a spare life jacket to show his wife what is inside. Now the crew begins to direct the passengers into the boats. "Women and children first!" they shout. Lifeboats are slowly lowered into the ocean by ropes, which pass through the pulleys on cranes called davits. April 15th, 12:45 a.m. The crew lowers the first lifeboat 60 feet, 18 meters down to the ocean. But there are only 28 people in a boat for 65. The passengers don't want to leave the Titanic. The lifeboats seem unsteady compared to the big ship. The band is even playing cheerful music. One by one, the lifeboats are lowered when disaster looms. Boat number 13 drifts under another lifeboat that is being lowered. The boat nearly crashes on top of number 13. At the last moment, a passenger frees the ropes holding number 13, and the boat floats away to safety. As the lifeboats are lowered, lights are seen on the horizon. Another ship is out there. It is far away, but the crew of the Titanic has a way to get its attention. They fire distress rockets that explode like fireworks in the sky. Then they use the Morse lamp. But there is no response. Titanic's wireless operators keep calling for help. Although other ships are close enough, the wireless operators on some of these ships are asleep. The Olympic, the Titanic's sister ship, has heard the distress call, but she is too far away to be able to help. Emergency information. Titanic, Liverpool. If an emergency evacuation is ordered, make your way to the top deck. Important. Put on a life jacket. Listen to instructions from the crew. They will direct you to a lifeboat. Women and children to evacuate first. There is room for an additional 16 lifeboats, but this would clutter the decks and restrict your comfort during the journey. Information key. 14 lifeboats, capacity 65 people. 2 lifeboats, capacity 40 people. 4 collapsible lifeboats, capacity 47 people. Life jackets. Life jackets are stowed in your cabin. There is one for each person aboard. Put your life jacket on over your head. Bring the lower side straps around to the front. Tie the straps together securely across your chest. Do the same to the upper side straps. Material. Cork floats covered with canvas. April 15th, 1:15 a.m. The final hour. Slowly, slowly, the bow sinks farther. Slowly, slowly, the stern rises above it. The band plays on, trying to keep the passengers calm. But everyone realizes now that the Titanic cannot be saved. April 15th, 2:05 a.m. The last wooden lifeboat is about to be lowered. Colonel Astor is waving goodbye to his wife. He is not allowed to board. With more than 1,500 passengers still left, the crew has formed a protective circle around the lifeboat so that only women and children can take the last few seats. Colonel Astor rushes to the kennels where his dog Kitty is kept. He sets all the dogs free so they will not be trapped. Michel and Edmond Nevratil are still on the ship. Their father has wrapped them in blankets to keep them warm. Their only hope of escape is in the last collapsible boat about to be launched. Their father pushes forward and hands them to a woman sitting in the boat. Then he steps back into the crowd. 2:17 a.m. The music has stopped now. but the ship's lights are still glowing in the dark. As the stern rises higher into the air, everything inside the ship slides to the bow. Pianos, furniture, statues, paintings, dishes, luggage. Every object on board crashes down and piles up. Out on the deck, there are still hundreds of passengers. The slant on the deck is so steep now that they cannot stand up straight. Some are clinging desperately to the rails. Others lose their grip and fall into the sea. It is a long drop, like a fall from a tall building. Those wearing life jackets are kept afloat, but the water is ice cold and they will soon freeze to death if they are not rescued. April 15th, 2:20 a.m. The Titanic's lights flicker as she plunges. Then she's gone. People in the water scream for help, but their cries soon die down. The survivors huddle together, cold and afraid. Here in the North Atlantic, there is no first, second, or third class. Rich and poor, young and old, they are all in this together now. All of them hoping to survive, none of them knowing what will happen next. April 15th, 3 a.m. The survivors in the lifeboats had rowed away from the ship. They feared that they would either be sucked down with the Titanic as she sank, or be swamped by the people in the water. But now, some sailors decide to row back to the floating wreckage of the Titanic. They want to see if anyone is still alive. They row through hundreds of frozen bodies and find just 4 survivors. One dies shortly afterward. Lost and saved. This bar chart shows the numbers of people lost and saved among the 3 classes and crew. First class, second class, third class, crew. Numbers of people based on the findings of the American inquiry about the sinking of the Titanic. Key: women and children saved. Men saved. Women and children lost. Men lost. Conclusion: the numbers of those who survived varied greatly among the 3 classes and crew. Since there was no passenger list, the real number of people who lost their lives will never be known. The Carpathia had raced through the dangerous ice fields after receiving the distress message. April 15th, 3:30 a.m. The rescue. It is almost dawn. The survivors have been at sea for several hours now without food, water, or warm clothing. Many are almost frozen to death. Suddenly, they see rockets in the distance. Another ship is on its way. Help has arrived. It is the Carpathia. Her crew had heard the Titanic's distress calls, but the ship was 58 miles, 93 kilometers away, a 3-hour trip. She has arrived too late to save the people in the water, but not too late to save the people in the lifeboats. One by one, the Titanic survivors board the Carpathia. Some climb a rope ladder to reach the deck of the ship. Others who are too weak or too young to climb are hauled aboard in cargo nets. Everyone is counted. Of the 2,206 passengers, only 705 people have survived. The Carpathia now heads for New York. The journey will take 3 days. The dazed survivors are given warm clothes and food. People start to wait along the pier in New York. April 18th. Friends and relatives have been frantic for news. They are confused by the different reports. The Carpathia is not releasing any information, and newspapers are making up stories. One says everyone survived and that the Titanic is being towed by another ship. Other newspapers say many have died. In New York, people wait anxiously for the Carpathia, hoping they will see their loved ones step off the ship. Newspapers are filled with conflicting stories of the disaster. April 18th, 9:25 p.m. At last, the Carpathia sails into New York Harbor. Nearly 30,000 people are lining the dock. Among them are many doctors and nurses sent to help the survivors. The gangplank is lowered from the Carpathia, and the first survivors walk down. People on the dock rush forward. Some call out the names of their relatives. Harold Bride, the only surviving wireless operator, is carried off the ship. His feet are badly frostbitten and have been bandaged. Also among the survivors are 2 dogs. The grateful survivors of the Titanic disaster presented this medal to the crew of the Carpathia for saving their lives. Harold Bride was washed overboard as the Titanic sank. He managed to climb onto an overturned lifeboat. Michel and Edmond Nevatila with their mother. Michel and Edmond Nevatila are safe. They are being looked after by a survivor until they can be reunited with their mother, Marcelle, in France. She did not know that they were on the Titanic. The children's father had been separated from their mother and had kidnapped the boys. He had told travelers that their mother was dead. Marcelle recognized her sons from a photograph in a French newspaper telling the tragic story about the 2 orphaned boys. Mrs. Astor is among the survivors. She had helped to row her lifeboat away from the sinking Titanic. Out in the ocean, ships are finding bodies of the victims. Many of them cannot be identified, but Colonel Astor's body is identified. His initials were printed on his shirt collar. Captain Smith's body is not found among the 328 bodies recovered. Some reports say that he was standing on the bridge before the ship sank. Heroes and Heroines. Whether rich or poor, every survivor had a remarkable tale to tell. There were also some remarkable acts of bravery. Molly Brown, first-class passenger, lifeboat number 6. She took command of the lifeboat and encouraged the other women on board the lifeboat to also row with great determination toward the rescue ship. Countess of Rothes, first-class passenger, lifeboat number 8. In the lifeboat, she took her turn at the oars as well as at the tiller for most of the night. 5th Officer Lowe, crew, lifeboat number 14. He commanded his lifeboat to go back and look for survivors, pulling 4 people from the water. The Titanic musicians, crew, went down with the ship. After the collision, they played a selection of songs to keep the passengers' spirits lifted until the very end. Women in the lifeboats helped to hand out blankets and comforted each other. Others gave up their personal letters to be burned as signals. Many put the safety of others before their own. Dr. Robert Ballard was the scientist in charge of the expedition. Discovered. In the years after the Titanic sank, many people wanted to find her, but the ship's exact location was a mystery, and the technology didn't exist to reach her even if her whereabouts had been known. The Titanic had plunged 12,460 feet, 3,798 meters. That's the height of 10 Empire State Buildings. More than 70 years passed. Then, in 1985, a team led by Dr. Robert Ballard used an unmanned diving vessel called Argo. Argo had a video camera that sent pictures back to the research ship. The explorers sent Argo down to the bottom of the ocean. Day after day, Argo searched the seabed for signs of the wreck but saw nothing. Then, one day, an object appeared on the monitor of the research ship. It was an image of a huge boiler. The Titanic had been found. She had broken into two and her contents spilled across the seabed. This is an image of the front of a boiler, which was found lying on the Atlantic seabed. The Titanic had 29 boilers. The picture above shows the boilers before they were installed on the Titanic. The Nautil, a small submersible, was carried by a special research ship to the site of the wreck and then launched. 2 years later, another submersible, the Nautil, visited the Titanic. It was equipped with the latest technology, including a movable video camera that could film inside the rooms of the Titanic. The Nautil also had 2 robotic arms, which were operated by a pilot inside the submersible. These arms had different attachments that enabled the pilot to pick up various types of objects. The Nautil brought back thousands of ordinary objects that were scattered over the seabed: toys, eyeglasses, money, and jewels. They were all that remained of the Titanic's victims. Once on dry land, the objects were carefully cleaned and restored so that they could be displayed in exhibitions. These objects helped tell the story of the Titanic and her passengers. Nautil's robotic arm is used to pick up this safe. Part of the safe had rotted away and it was empty. This money was also retrieved by the Nautil. It was found inside a bag that was lying on the seabed. Nautil's technology also enabled scientists to answer a question that had remained a mystery since the sinking. What really did happen to the Titanic? Nautil's evidence showed that the iceberg did not carve a 300-foot, 91-meter gash along the side of the Titanic as suspected. Instead, the iceberg had made 6 small cuts below the waterline, which had allowed the water to gush into her hull. By examining the wreck of the Titanic, scientists were also able to explain exactly how she broke apart. How the Titanic sank. 1. The Titanic hits the iceberg, which scrapes the ship in 6 places. Water gushes in through the narrow openings. 2. The compartments flood one after another. The weight of the water in the bow starts to pull the ship under. 3. The front funnel collapses. Then, as the stern rises into the air, the other funnels also start to crash under the strain. 4. The strain on the ship is so great that she breaks apart. The bow plunges to the bottom. The stern starts to flood and then sinks. Tour of the ocean floor. Welcome inside the Nautil. For the next 6 hours, we will take a tour around the site of the Titanic's wreck. It will take us about 90 minutes to descend 12,470 feet, 3,800 meters to the site. The debris field is a square about 1 mile, 2.6 kilometers across and along. You will need to lie down flat and look through your porthole. The spotlights of the Nautil will light up the various parts. A. The bridge. B. The bow and crow's nest. C. The public areas. D. The debris field. E. The upper deck. F. The engines and boiler room. G. Coal from the boiler. H. The stern. propeller, upper deck, deck bench from promenade. Lessons of the Titanic. When the Titanic sank in 1912, a full inquiry was launched at the time. Many questions were asked. Would the Titanic have sunk if she had not sailed at full speed on that fatal night? Was her design at fault? All these issues were discussed, but more importantly, new safety regulations for passenger liners were passed. Ships had to carry enough lifeboats for everyone. Wireless operators had to listen to their radios all night long. A special airborne ice patrol was set up to help warn ships of dangerous icebergs. Never again would people dare call any ship unsinkable. The Titanic was a crucial